It's like a shark, NATO, except with poop.
I'm not happy.
So no doubt Melvin Capital is in a lot of pain.
There will be carnage, I can guarantee you.
They're starting to have to unwind their longs in order to pay for the pain that they are seeing in these other short positions that are getting absolutely crushed.
It is a corrupt system.
A casino-like atmosphere.
But when they all come to get out of that movie theater because somebody yelled fire, that door is only so big.
Now it's almost become this risk that if you're publicly coming out as a hedge fund and disclosing the stocks that you're against, as one trader, as one Twitter user put it, you're at risk of getting Melvined.
The reason the market is doing what it's doing is people are sitting at home getting the checks from the government.
Grandma and the little guy have all banded together into a big group, and they've done this to the stocks.
It's just a way of attacking wealthy people.
The authorities, should they step in?
You know, you have these massive bailouts. You have the Federal Reserve pumping money into failing banks and corporations. And then, I don't know, how many segments did CNBC do to talk about how the market is manipulated by these very companies and banks?
This fair share is a bullshit concept.
Ban social networks to talk about buying short stocks.
There's a number of different ways that the stock market is manipulated or, artificially moved in one direction or another. I generally think that almost all of it is absolute BS.
It is a corrupt system.
Hey everybody, around the nation, Waldorf Nation, Jeff Waldorf here with you. I got a great and special guest here on the show. So let me just, of course, say hello, and hopefully everybody says hello as well, to my special guest, Anna Kasparian. She is the...
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, she's the co-host of The Young Turks, executive producer, also the host of Weekends with Jacobin. Great show. Check that out. That's on Saturdays. What time is it on Saturdays?
10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern, and we've got a soft start. And what I mean by that is we try to be on time, but we're usually like a few minutes late. Anyway, that's my way of saying that it's a little more of a laid back structure compared to TYT. So if you're looking for deep dives where we're not like restricted with time, you'll definitely enjoy Weekends.
It's an excellent show. So everybody, sign up to that. Subscribe to Jacobin on YouTube. Again, it's definitely worth your time. Nando is an excellent co-host as well. I remember meeting Nando once before, so in person. He's a really super nice guy.
Yeah, it's not too often that you come across people in this line of work that you not only enjoy working with, but want to keep in your life as close friends. And Nando falls under that category. He's just an all-around great person, as is John, as is Wozni Lambre. I met Woz through Michael Brooks, and I just feel really lucky that I have that connection. Someone that understands, the loss of Michael passing away, and it's been a tough time, but the silver lining has been all the great people that he introduced me to before, he unfortunately passed well before he needed to.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to have him join the show once before and speak to him at length. So I know it's kind of like a downer intro to the show, but again, I'm super glad to have you here. Thank you so much for sharing your time and giving us your time. I know you're a super busy person. So with that said, why don't we get into the show? I want to talk about some different stories and maybe, give you kind of like, I kind of like if I have a lot of stories to kind of give my guest the pick of some of them. So, I've got the Q Shaman is ready to testify against Donald Trump. I think that's always fun, and have a discussion on that. We've got the stimulus checks, Warnock and Asa for like, let's go in the stimulus checks. What's holding it up? What is going on here? We've got a black family that was denied a burial plot for their father due to racism. Louisiana, big surprise, right? We got Jew lasers, QAnon. So that's one of their conspiracy theories. We're gonna, talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene. I know you've been talking about her a lot. She's in incredible danger, and so I want to talk about that as well. And then we have maybe not an unfortunate background for somebody, because we're all like doing the telecommunication thing, but there's a surprise in somebody's background that's taken the internet by storm, and it's fun. It's a fun story. I say that with such conviction, like, you better find it fun. GameStonks too. That's another story. So, why don't we start out with?
Damn, Jeff, we better get it started. Homeboy.
Q Shaman, let's do it. I know. I do this all the time. Believe me. Trust me, honestly, I do it. All right, let's go. Bad me. All right. So Jacob Chansley, otherwise known as the QAnon shaman, has fully turned on President Donald Trump and is actually looking forward to helping take him down. So his lawyer, this comes through his lawyer, Al Watkins, who is offering his client as a witness to the upcoming Senate impeachment trial. Now, as I said, Watkins, and this is funny, Watkins calls him the guy with the horns and the fur. I know. I couldn't help myself. I'm sorry. Besides, it's like, ultimately it's not funny because this guy was involved in a dangerous, deadly insurrection. But then again, I always tell my audience, if we don't laugh about these things, we might cry. So there's that. So now what matters is that Chansley, his argument is that I was incited by the president. He told me to do these things, or, stochastic terrorism, right? Oh, you better go do something. You can't let this happen to me. They're going to steal the election. They're stealing it from all of us. And so he's like, well, I got to do something. I know, I'll go invade the Capitol building. I'll break some windows, and then I'll mill around for a while and film myself doing crime. These are not the smartest people, Anna. They're not Trump's not sending his best. I'm just saying, not sending his best.
He certainly did not send his best, whether it's through his administration or with what we experienced, not just during the Capitol riots, which I think was the one of the worst events, probably the worst event from the Trump administration. But remember, it started off with the hate march in Charleston, and he continuously embolden these types of people, encourage them. Just a month or so prior to the riots taking place, he told the Proud Boys to stand back and stand by. And then he pretended as though he misspoke and he didn't actually mean that he wanted them to stand by. Donald Trump has certainly encouraged the worst elements of society to do what they've been doing. And I think what was really fascinating about the aftermath of the riots that took place in the Capitol was the sheer shock and astonishment that these men felt when they were getting arrested and facing federal charges for what they had done, because they genuinely believed that Donald Trump had their back. They genuinely believed that the election had been stolen from Donald Trump. They believed everything that he said. I mean, when it comes to Republican lawmakers like Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz, Gosar in the House, these are people who might not be the brightest lawmakers, but they're not dumb enough to actually believe that the election was stolen from Donald Trump. But they engaged in this false narrative for their own political careers because they made a political calculation that going along with this false narrative of widespread voter fraud would appeal to Trump's base. And
Unfortunately, Trump's base doesn't just magically disappear once Trump is out of office. They exist and they will continue to devolve into I don't know what, right? And the real question to me is the Biden administration, and it might be unfair, some people might see this as unfair, but it is what it is. Biden wanted to be the leader of this country, so he has taken on this massive responsibility. Is he willing to do what it takes to genuinely unify the country? And unifying the country, in my eyes, isn't unifying with Republican lawmakers. Who cares about them? Unifying means doing what it takes to help the American people see one another, regardless of their political ideology, as human beings. And that's a difficult thing to do when there's anger and rage in the country that's further perpetuated by economic anxiety and right-wing media telling angry, furious people that all of their problems are caused by immigrants, Mexicans, Black people, Black Lives Matter, gay people, transgender people. I mean, that's
Liberals.
where the division comes from. Liberals, exactly. And so when you look at the rise of fascism in the 1930s, you know, after World War I, you have countries that are celebrating the fact that they won the war, but their people are living in poverty. And you have these right-wing zealots, you have these fascists, whether it's Franco in Spain, Mussolini in Italy, Hitler in Germany, saying that, hey, you know what? You're poor, you're suffering, and it's the other's fault. And you see a very similar trend happening right now in the United States and across the world. And so I want to believe that Biden is smart enough to recognize that. But what's really infuriating is what we've seen so far from his very short time in the White House is this capitulating to the Republican Party, and it needs to stop. The Republican lawmakers are not our friends. They don't care about unity. They don't care about working together. What they care about is their own political careers, and they've read the tea leaves. And for them, the political calculation is to appeal to Trump's base. Ain't no unifying with those people. Sorry.
Right. So you made a lot of great points there. And so, look, Republicans, you're right. Republican congressmen, they're not stupid enough to believe this stuff, but they think the American people are. And that's really what they bank on, is the ignorance and stupidity of the American people. And so I'm not calling the American people, I'm not calling Trump supporters stupid, right? What I'm saying is that there's so much misinformation and disinformation that, you know, they can't help be ignorant and ill-informed and then start to fall into conspiracies. I posted something on my Twitter. I don't really do this very often. I suck at my Twitter game. I really need to up that shit. But you know, I posted earlier today.
Twitter sucks. But anyway, go ahead.
Fair point. But I tweeted a couple of examples. It's like, hey, you know, why you know, a lot of liberal pundits are like, I don't understand how this disinformation could spread so far and so wide across Twitter and Facebook and social media. I don't quite understand. And then I posted a bunch of pictures of like, subscribe to, you know, you are done with your free articles for the month. And you and I, like, we're in the news business. We blow through those free articles like that in one day with so much news, especially during the Trump, you know, the Trump era. And so what's the average American seeing as news, right? They're running into paywall after paywall after paywall. And I understand that journalists, of course, have to survive, but you also have to have basic dissemination of information available to the masses. And they don't really have that. What they have is Fox News. What they have is Newsmax, Infowars. Guess what? All those are free. But like actual real journalism, and I understand that it's expensive, but it's not free and accessible. And that presents a really large problem. And of course, education in general, I followed it up by another tweet, you know, just pointing out the cost of a higher education and how, again, a lot of liberals, because I see this in forums everywhere, are like, God, why are there so many uneducated people in this country who can't distinguish fact and can't critically think? Well, that's the reason. They can't afford it. So I think this all kind of boils down to that. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, you make such a great point. So there are a lot of different issues at play, and certainly putting critical content behind a paywall is a terrible idea. And I know that you know, print
outlets are trying to find a way to stay sustainable, right? So they're not in the same camp as cable news networks that get an insane amount of advertising dollars and are able to easily, support the reporting they do. And remember, print journalists are really the ones who are doing the journalism. There's a big debate within the field regarding what counts as journalism. And in my eyes, like every once in a while when someone refers to me as a journalist, like I cringe a little bit because I have my own perspective of what a journalist is. And I think of someone who goes out there and literally gathers the news. Now, you can do that from your home. You can do that through having phone interviews, email interviews, to the contrary of what you might have heard from previous colleagues of mine, I don't simply read an article and then just talk about it on the show. There's actually a lot of digging and research that goes into what we do at TYT because we want to offer something a little more robust than just reading from an article.
I do that. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
But I mean, it's just, and by the way, so who cares about our process? What I really want to talk about is just the tremendous amount of resources it takes to break news, to be a reporter on the field, filing freedom of information requests, going out there and, dealing with like Kenny Clips. Exactly. That takes resources. It's actually pretty expensive. And when we started an investigative reporting team at TYT, I mean, there are travel expenses involved. You're sending a reporter to a part of the country to cover a story for weeks at a time. You got to pay for their food and you got to put them up. Like it all makes sense, right? All of that stuff starts to accumulate. So when you look at how expensive investigative reporting is and how challenging this oversaturated media market is, you have to find a way to remain sustainable. And so, a lot of these legacy outlets or legacy publications like the New York Times, for instance, put a lot of their content behind a paywall. Same with the Wall Street Journal. And of course, the Wall Street Journal's got its editorial board, and that's different from their reporters. They do some good reporting. So they break some stories that you want to read, and in our case, we want to share with our audience. I love the Financial Times. Financial Times, everyone should be reading it if they can. But there is a subscription, and it's a pricey subscription to say the least.
True.
And then for me personally, I feel that it's incredibly important to support my fellow progressives in the media. So I'm a patron for Ben Burgess, the Michael Brooks show, which has turned into like a legacy project, which I still support financially through my, patronage, I guess, and The Left Reckoning. So I don't know. It's really hard to navigate a way to have a sustainable company, be able to provide for the journalism that you want to, put out there in the world, while also doing it in an ethical way that doesn't serve as something that's like counterproductive, right? Because the paywall is counterproductive. Right. So it's definitely a legitimate concern, and I think you bring up a really important point.
Yeah, and it kind of like to circle back, this is sort of why we're in this issue. In this problem, we have a lack of information, of freely accessible information and factual information. A lot of conspiracy theorist channels and things on the right and some even on the left that can be problematic or are problematic. And so you end up having the Jacob Chansleys of the world, believing that Donald Trump, and the votes had like
big massive dumps
of like, just random votes just lying around, and they believe all this stuff. And so that propels them to do some dangerous things and some problematic things. And we're just in this situation. And the real question is, how do we get over it? And I don't necessarily have an answer to this. But I do know that there are people who also don't really want to find an answer to this and want to use it for their own personal political gain, as you point out, Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, etc. And so it's I think this is something that we're going to have to deal with, and I don't think that Biden is equipped with it or equipped to deal with it. Since you mentioned that earlier, I think Joe Biden is still stuck in 1993. With Tip O'Neill or whatever old politicians were there at the time. and doesn't understand, because maybe it's an age thing and maybe I'm being like super ageist when I talk about this, because generally they are so far removed from our generation, which is always online. And it is funny because they're the same generation that told you don't trust everything you see on the TV, and they're trusting, Patriot, the patriotmoms.org, or you don't touch my freedomgun.com, say, oh, did you know that Hillary Clinton eats babies? I didn't know that. Did you know that?
Yeah.
No,
I think that it's not true. Yeah, exactly. But when you live in a society that doesn't seem to make sense, then anything can be believable, right? Like, I think that's something that also kind of needs to be addressed, because we live in a system where we've all been told since we were children that this is the land of opportunity. All you need to do is work really hard, get an education, be a good person, stay out of trouble, don't do drugs, whatever. And I guarantee you there's an endless number of people in my generation and our generation who followed the rules and then found themselves in their 30s drowning in debt. And then they see people who have no work ethic, people who inherited money and then play with that money in this giant casino known as the stock market, and they make more money off of that, right? Like, it's as you get older in the United States, you become more and more aware of how much of a fraud the whole idea of American freedom really is. Because what you're taught to do from a young age is to be a good little worker who doesn't challenge authority, who opens yourself up for exploitation by employers, right? Who do nothing in a lot of cases. By the way, let me be clear. I'm not talking about my employer, because TYT is very different and actually a very empowering place to work. But I'm talking about general, like, if you look back and you're just looking at the amount of value an individual worker provides for any company, and then you do a cost benefit analysis, you weigh the amount of profit or revenue one individual worker makes for a company, you compare that to what they're getting paid. I mean, people are waking up to the fact that they're being robbed. They're being robbed of their futures. They're being robbed of the present. And we just keep getting told over and over again, keep your head down, don't complain. You're lucky. You're lucky you have a job. You're lucky you're employed, right? And so it's just, it's a system that doesn't make sense. And the anger, the rage is palpable. People feel it. And I just think it makes individuals more susceptible to the conspiracy theories. Because again, if you're living in a system where everyone's telling you, this is the best system, this is the best country, this is the land of opportunity, and you're not experiencing that in your life, it's not making sense, well, then conspiracy theories make a lot of sense. You're looking for an explanation for why things aren't working out the way you were told they would, I think that's a big part of it.
Oh, absolutely. And you and I think could have a really long substantive conversation on this, because I am somebody who grew up, I'm, working class, Section 8 food stamps, all that stuff. And there are, plenty of people who've actually had it worse than I did. But I'm not, but I grew up through that, minimum wage jobs, stocking shelves, factory work, all that stuff. And we could have a conversation about how everybody in that area knows and feels that we're being screwed. It's so many great points that you brought up. So, but why don't we move on?
By the way, I'm sorry if I'm like ranting and filibustering your stories.
Totally
I'll
fine.
be better.
No, that's why you're here, to have a good conversation. That's what I like to have on this show. So it's great.
Awesome. Thank you.
and I'm here for as long as you can be here. So, all right, let's move on to Marjorie Taylor Greene. Does that sound all right? Or we could do the GameStonks being compared to Trumpism. Yeah, all of those are both along the same topic as the first.
Okay, let's do GameStonks. I feel like I have more to say about that.
Awesome. As the GameStop surge continues to make billionaire hedge funders cry, and we all love that, the establishment has actually begun comparing the wave of anti-Wall Street sentiment to the Capitol riots, which seems like a rather strange thing to tie this entire thing to. So let me give you a couple of examples. This is from USA Today, where, they write, weeks before the mob descended on the Capitol, Trump supporters who refused to, accept the November election results took to social media, Parler, Gab, etc., and did this, plans for the massive protests, right? And then they write, in the same vein, small-pocketed investors use the social media platform Reddit to launch their assault on Wall Street, notice the language there, and give GameStop's stock price, drive it higher. Reddit users on a forum called Wall Street Bets took matters into their own hands after hedge funds began unloading the struggling retailer's stock through a process known as short selling. One person, Ken Qanon, president of Mercedian Asset Management from New Jersey, made the most direct comparison. He said, if you want to call what happened at the Capitol a mob, you can also call what's happening at GameStop a mob too. How many of the protesters that stormed the Capitol actually thought the FBI would be hunting them down and threatening them with 20-year jail terms? They were just going with the crowd. Everyone was doing it. The GameStop investors have been fallen victim to the same kind of group thinking, Qanon said, without considering or fully understanding that huge, easy profits can just as quickly turn into major financial loss. Quote, who doesn't want to make money when everyone else is making money? But rookie investors make rookie mistakes. In many ways, people are playing with dynamite and they might blow off their fingers. So you have any thoughts on this so far, what they're saying about this? And what do you think they're getting wrong?
Everything. They're getting everything wrong. On one hand, with the Capitol rioters, we're dealing with extreme right-wingers who simply did not like the results of our democratic process, which indicated that Donald Trump lost the election. He was not reelected. And so they decided to violently storm the Capitol, killing 5 people, by the way, in order to overthrow the government and get the person they like in the White House. That's what they did. That is very different from the underlying message by the Reddit users, the subreddit users for Wall Street Bets. What they noticed through their own analysis, whether you buy it or not, that there was this hedge fund, Melvin Capital, shorting a company, GameStop, that I'm sure has a lot of nostalgic value for these people as well, right? They noticed that
sure.
Of course. I mean, I grew up with a lot of these brands. I remember being annoyed because I wasn't really a gamer growing up, but it didn't matter. I mean, I remember going to the mall with my little brother, and my brother would insist on going to GameStop. And I remember walking into GameStop and it smelled like a sweaty locker. It was so gross in there. It was always packed. And it was just like, since there were so many people in there, it was always like really like stuffy and it smelled. But anyway, I have fond memories of those days. It reminds me of my childhood. So I know that there's an element of nostalgia to it. And when you look at the other brands that were being shorted by these hedge funds, they're the kinds of brands that we know and love, right? Express Clothing Store, Nokia, like just brands that, we know that they haven't really been doing well. And here's the issue. So we have these retail traders, right? These are the small investors who are on Wall Street Bets, deciding to do something in a collectivist way, which is incredibly impressive.
Ironic,
to help
too.
save these companies. And look, are they going to be able to save these companies for the long haul? Probably not. But the point that I think is important to focus on is that hedge funds being able to short certain companies should be illegal. It should be illegal. There is no value to that. That doesn't add any value or any type of important investment to these companies. What it does, especially when these hedge funds publish their analysis, is it accelerates the demise of these companies. Because what they're signaling to the world is, hey, through our fancy research, we think this company is going to fail. And what do you think happens to other investors? Well, then they start to sell. And it, again, rapidly accelerates the decline of these companies. And then on top of that, you want to talk about market manipulation. Then these hedge fund guys
go to CNBC and they do these segments talking and promoting their analysis, which then further accelerates the rapid decline of these companies. Like, again, shorting stocks, shorting a specific company, there's no value to it. And I think what happened here was you have these retail investors who are like, no, let's band together and let's make these hedge funds pay. And there was something real sweet about that. Yeah, I love it too. And, you know, some people have been talking about, and it's a legitimate point, it's not just the retail investors who made money off of this. There were certainly hedge funds who were privy to what was going on. Robinhood, which is an ironically named brokerage, to be honest with you, has been working with hedge funds, essentially selling the data of its users to the hedge funds. So there were hedge funds like BlackRock, for instance, that made a killing as a result of what went down. But the second point that I want to bring up, and it's an important point, is the issue of manipulation, because that manipulation has been going on for a very, very, very long time, right? The market is manipulated by the Federal Reserve pumping money into failing companies and banks, which then turn around and do corporate stock buybacks and artificially inflate the values of their shares. It happens when these massive corporations get these tax cuts. And the tax cuts, of course, are sold to the American people as a way of increasing your wages and creating new jobs. Of course, that never happens. What do the companies do? They turn around, they buy shares of their own stocks, they artificially inflate the value of the shares. That kind of manipulation has been going on forever. And there's never any discussion on CNBC about how wrong that is. But once you have a group of Reddit users taking matters into their own hands and finding a way to outsmart these fancy Wall Street guys, well, then all of a sudden we got a problem. And why don't we go ahead and insult these people by comparing them to extreme right-wing Capitol rioters? It's just so pathetic.
100%. Boy, I need to get that thing that John Landeroli, he says that all the time. You know that. They should just I should just have like an emoji, like he said the thing. I said the thing. I'm sorry, John. I stole your line. That happens all the time. But okay, anyway, but you made a lot of great points. And the thing about this is they don't want us dirty pores getting in their game. And that's the whole problem that they're having. That's why people like Leon Cooperman are crying right now, right? And there's there are people home with their, you know what? Let me just show you the video. Okay.
The reason the market is doing what it's doing is people are sitting at home getting the checks from the government, okay? And this fair share is a bullshit concept. It's just a way of attacking wealthy people. And, you know, I think it's inappropriate. We all got to work together and pull together.
But yeah, that's, you know, Leon crying Cooperman. And so, but again, it's because these Redditors have exposed the system for what it is, a giant casino with the rules that are rigged massively in favor of the large hedge funds. And to see a hedge fund brought to its knees to get Melvined is just, I mean, you can't get any better than that.
One of my favorite people on this very topic is Nomi Prinz. She's been on TYT several times before. And I remember Nomi Prinz from the days when I was just a guest booker at TYT. I would book her on the show and this is like in 2007, 2008. I just remember everything that she would say would go right past me. Like I couldn't understand what she was talking about. But obviously, like I've grown a little and I've learned more about how the markets work. And fairly recently, she wrote a book called Collusion, and it's not about Russia or anything like that. It's about the central banks and how much they have manipulated the markets. And by the way, not only US stocks, how much they've manipulated the world, right? In propping up certain companies, doing something known as quantitative easing. This really exploded following the 2008 economic collapse. And it's very clear that much like our two-tiered justice system, we have a two-tiered financial system that has already chosen the winners from the losers. And let me tell you something, you and I are not considered the winners. And so Robinhood playing interference for these hedge funds by restricting investment into these stocks, whether it's GameStop, AMC, Express, basically the stocks that had been shorted by these hedge funds. The fact that Robinhood jumped in to protect these hedge funds, I mean, it shows you that this is not a free market, right? Is this a free market? A free market? Really? It seems like there are regulations in place, but the regulations are rigged against ordinary people like us.
Absolutely. And worse, and almost worse than that. Because again, the rules are rigged against us, and it's very clear. But then they're also talking down to us as well, as if we're the idiots. I mean, Chris Alyssa, let me give you a quote from him. Here's what he, and normally, again, Chris Alyssa does some good stuff, but has some pretty dog shit opinions. And so here's what he writes. What's the end game for GameStop surgers, he asks. Like, now that they've proven to the point that they can take a stock that the pros, since they're not pros, have declared moribund and revive it, at least for a moment, what do they do now? Because I don't really believe that GameStop is... I'm sorry, whenever I read one of these people, I get into the rich person voice. Oh, I do declare. That GameStop is suddenly the new Amazon or Apple or Google. It's still mostly just a business that derives its value from brick and mortar stores and malls, which again is not exactly a big growth area in coming years. No, look, that's a perfectly substantive point. Definitely, right? But here's the thing. He says, the point is that there's no real point.
Though?
He does not.
That's the thing though. Like they don't ever scratch beneath the surface. And I think that's a problem. Why is GameStop suffering? Right? I mean, we have monopolies
for one,
like Amazon, it's just, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, for one, maybe because it smells like gym socks and feet and is sweaty.
But I love it. It's America. It's America, Jeff.
It smells like
I
America.
Want the ability. I don't have children, but I think about my nieces a lot, actually. Like, what are my nieces' teenage years going to be like? Are they just going to be home or at school all day? Are they just going to be behind a computer zooming in with their friends? Like, think about all of these gathering places. I mean, I know that it also feeds into consumerism, but put that aside for a minute. Going to the mall wasn't just about going to the mall and shopping. Like, it was about meeting up with your friends after school, having a good time. And that connection, that person-to-person connection is really like deteriorating right now as everything, I mean, obviously during the pandemic, everything has moved online, but even after the pandemic, just think about how isolated people are becoming, how atomized things are becoming, people are becoming. And it's, I want the ability to go to a brick and mortar store. I want the ability to, and I don't want all of these massive malls to turn into warehouses for Amazon. I mean, it's like this dystopian, future that we're looking at straight on, and it's terrifying. So I would much rather be in a smelly GameStop than
me too.
Look at a mall that's been converted into an Amazon warehouse.
Yeah, I mean, look, I used to go. That was my childhood. Maybe a little too close. It's a little too close to home, Anna. I'm just saying. I smell a lot better now, but anyway. But yeah, you're absolutely right in the fact that, I mean, these stores have not been doing good before the pandemic because of the switch to all online. And as somebody who is a hardcore gamer, I sometimes like to even go into the GameStop just to go and browse the games that they have. Even though I know I could sit home and download these games and probably get a better deal. I mean, look, I've done reports on GameStop before. They do have some pretty terrible business practices, terrible labor practices, and that's a result of their financial situation and, of course, capitalism in general. But at the same time, you're right that it brings us back to that nostalgia, and they are important places to be able to have some human interaction in a world that generally, even again after the pandemic, is not as exactly conducive to that anymore. And so really important. But let me finish this quote here from Saliza. He says the point is that there's no real point beyond showing up the pros, proving to them that they aren't as smart as they think they are and they don't have the ability to control anything, which again has its roots in Trumpism. That strategy, if it's even a word, can be associated with what this is, has massive limits. Sticking it to the man will only get you so far. It's not a solution to any problem. It's just a way to express frustration, anger, and a feeling of helplessness. Think of it this way. Giving someone the finger might make you feel good in the moment, but it doesn't solve anything. I don't know about you, Anna, but I really do love giving hedge funds the finger because they have done so many times. The 2007-2008 financial crisis that wiped out so many millions of families, for example, while greedy, stockholders and short sellers have been, drinking champagne on their now many yachts. And so I kind of feel like giving them the finger, or maybe even the guillotine, eat the rich.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street, the day that Occupy Wall Street protesters were being forced out of Zuccotti Park, there were Wall Street, people working in Wall Street, essentially watching it happen, laughing and mocking the protesters. So
it's better. It's better. Let me just add in this real quick. They were dumping job applications on them for outside the windows. You remember?
I do. And so when Chris Cillizza brings up the, they're doing this because of like anger and they feel hopeless. And you hit the nail on the head. It's because the so-called pros, our politicians, people in positions of power who have promised to represent our best interests, have done the exact opposite. And they've only helped to make this rigged system more robust in favor of people who are already powerful and privileged. And so, his tone there actually reminds me a lot of, my personal experience working at TYT. And like, I have the benefit of having been there for 14 years and seeing, just how mainstream media treated us. And by the way, still continues to treat us. But in 2007, 2008, 2010, for years, the idea of new media serving as any type of competition for legacy media outlets was laughable. They thought we were a joke. And I remember like around 2012, was when Cenk started getting contacted by some of these legacy media outlets because they wanted advice on how to digitize some of their content. And they had no choice really but to adapt with something that was changing. And I don't know if this is a sign of something changing within our financial system, but I'm excited about it. Because what this has done for a lot of people, a lot of young people who lean left don't know much about how the market works. Like they don't know much about like how the stock market is manipulated. And now for the first time, it's just become very crystal clear to them. And I think that this kind of knowledge is important, right? Because it's all a game. It's all a game. And the winning party is not the party that we're invited to, we're not part of. And so when we get pointed at and when Wall Street Bets gets accused of manipulating the market, I mean, that's a rich accusation considering the manipulation that's been going on. And for anyone who like Josh Barro, who, he's definitely one of these centrist guys. And he like earnestly put out some tweets about how wrong this is. And, the market it's important. This is going to discourage people from investing in these companies that are trying to do the right. I don't know, just all this, like, it came from an earnest place. But being able to short companies, there's no value to that. There's no benefit to that. It makes it clear that this is just it's a casino. This is all about gambling. It's, glorified gambling. And it's even worse than what you experience in a casino because it's even more rigged than playing penny slots. You get what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because if you're playing penny slots and you hit the jackpot, you win $1,000. You know, you don't have like a casino worker show up and say, no, actually, no, we're going to change the rules, and it turns out that you didn't win $1,000.
Right.
But that's what they're trying to do right now with Robinhood and TD Ameritrade and all these other brokerage firms, you know, preventing people from being able to buy shares that they want to buy.
Right. And really, I see that as a result of the democratization, to kind of bring it back to the media angle and new media angle, because I think that there's a lot of, you know, you can find a lot of parallel. The fact that news has now been democratized away from some of these larger outlets, the larger, more established outlets, as well as now these apps that were allowing the democratization of day trading and stocks and, you know, buying and selling stocks in general, is something that they don't like. They hate this because they feel that their power and their monopoly over this is kind of slipping away as more and more people get not only educated in this, but also become more proficient in this and start to make money outside of the traditional lanes of capitalism. And so I think this is definitely a reaction to this, shutting down those trades. And now you've got people that were on Robinhood that are doing a class action lawsuit against the company for not. They were, you know, I'm sure you've probably seen this as well, that they were selling people's shares without their consent.
Yep.
To force people to sell, and again, not allowing for you to buy, but only allowing you to trade in one way in order to help out their friends, the hedge funders. And it really is super disgusting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And one other thing that I'll point out, you know, I don't want anyone to mistake my commentary on this as saying that I want more involvement in the stock market. I think that the stock market is, first of all, buying individual stocks is a dangerous thing to do. It's very risky. And so I don't want anyone to be persuaded by what they're seeing in the news right now to engage in this, because it is risky and it is dangerous. And if you don't know what you're doing, you can lose a lot of money. And I would hate to see that.
Let me ask you something,
For
though.
me, go ahead, sure.
I just wanted to ask you, like, how much more risky is it than actually end up having your 401ks in these stocks as well? Because again, there are no retirement plans for workers anymore. It is all tied up in the stock market. And I think that's just a general failing of the system. But sorry, go ahead.
Yes. No, you bring up such a great point. Because in the 1970s, there was this shift in our financial system away from encouraging Americans to save their money, like save their money in a savings account that'll pay you a decent interest rate. We moved away from that to a finance-based system where everyone's encouraged to take debt out, like debt, right? Low interest, take out a loan, take out some debt. And so Americans are drowning in debt. Consumer debt in America is far higher today than it was at the height of the 2008 economic collapse. It is a disaster, okay? And so if you are, let's say you're someone who's actually terrified about finances, as I've been, because I grew up with immigrant parents. And so they really drilled in my head that you have to be frugal, you have to save, you have to be careful. And I'm really grateful that I got that education. But my parents have never invested in the stock market because they didn't trust it. And so I never received any real, like, formal education or education from my parents about investing.
Right.
It wasn't until a few years ago that I really started to immerse myself into this stuff because I wanted to understand it. I wanted to learn it. And so if you are fortunate enough to work at a company that offers a 401k and you're investing in it, please make sure that you're invested in mutual funds that minimizes the risk. That's different from being invested in individual stocks, right? Because when you're invested in an individual stock, like let's say GameStop, for instance, if GameStop fails, if it goes bankrupt, you're screwed. Like the shares you own in that company are, you're in trouble. But with mutual funds, they're set up in a way that diversifies the risk, and you're better off. I mean, it'll fluctuate, it'll go up and down. Obviously, I'm not a financial advisor, so please seek advice from an actual fiduciary expert.
But that is the best way to minimize your risk. So that's, you know, the advice that I feel comfortable giving you guys. But really, in an ideal world, you would have the ability to save for retirement in a way that is not tied to risk. That is not tied to risk. In an ideal world, there would be an incentive for you to put your money in a savings account that pays you a decent interest rate. Because here's what happens when the Federal Reserve pumps interest-free money into these banks. Banks don't need your deposits anymore. And so since they don't need your deposits anymore, they don't need to pay you an interest rate for depositing your money in their banks. And so the Federal Reserve screws us in so many ways. And I think average people are finally waking up to it. It's been such a disastrous way of trying to save our financial system. All it did was save Wall Street, but it screwed everyone else over.
True. And to get back to a point about, you know, risk, you said if GameStop goes bankrupt, very likely that they probably will. That's why there were so many short sales on it. And whatever happens, you know, when people have, whether they unload this stock or not, which would drive the price back down, there is always somebody waiting in the wings, an investment firm or a venture capital firm, for example. Bain Capital is the one I always tend to go back to, that makes money by stripping these companies apart. First they acquire it using, you know, loads of debt. And after the company is loaded with that debt, and then they unload more more debt from buying that company to the company, and then they strip it apart, fire everybody, and, you know, everybody's left without jobs. But the people who do this make a ton of money.
They do.
They make a killing. And so,
you know what they do with the debt that they take out? Not only do they take out a massive amount of debt and over leverage the company, but they use that debt to pay the executives insane salaries. Insane. Yeah.
And so
it's just so infuriating.
It is. And that is the way the system is set up, rigged against us to benefit the wealthy financiers. And so again, to go back to kind of tie everything together, I'm really happy to see a bunch of Redditors, you know, actually go and flip the bird at these hedge funds and drive them out of business. I think the total is about $70 billion in losses across all of Wall Street as a result of this. And I just sorry, not sorry. I bathe in billionaire tears.
Yep, I love it. So Jeff, I would love to keep going. I have to get prepared for my own show. But this was fantastic, and I'm really grateful that you had me on, and more importantly, that you've been patient with me. I apologize about yesterday. That was 100% my fault, and I can't believe I made that mistake. I just didn't know what day it was. I thought I thought today was the 28th, which is why I made the mistake. But anyway, I'm really happy to be on, and
thank you.
You know, hopefully we have a conversation again sometime in the future.
We absolutely need to. You know, I'm always open for invites to, you know, Saturdays or anything like that. Just, you know where to find me. So I thank you so much again for your time. This was an excellent conversation. I look forward to more. And you know, hopefully you have an excellent show tonight. You know, I'll tune in. I'll have it in the background, so as I usually do. And again, tell everybody. Okay, I always do this for the guests, like tell everybody where you can find you, but then everybody already knows. So it's kind of weird.
You're so sweet. Yeah, I mean, you can find me at Anna Kasparian on Twitter and youtube.com/theyoungturks or tyt.com/live.
Awesome.
You might have some fans, Jeff, that don't even know who we are. So don't short sell yourself, okay? Don't be a hedge fund and don't short yourself.
I'm so used to it though. I'm so used to taking a loss. But all right. Anyway, thank you, Anna. We'll see you hopefully later. Have an awesome weekend. And for the rest of you, I'm going to do some more stories here, and you know, talk about some other things that we didn't get to. So Anna, thank you again. We'll see you later.
Thank you. All right. Bye, everybody.
Yes, I will give this I would give this 5 stars. All right, so let me. I know we're running a little long, so what we're gonna do is take a quick break, come back. I'll do like one more story, and then we'll do it. So stay right here, Around the Nation.
Dumps. Big, massive dumps.
There's some whores in this house. Wet ass P word.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, Waldorf Nation. Again, that was an awesome interview with Anna Kasparian. Well, not interview, but an awesome show with Anna. So, all right. But we've got one more story that I want to talk about. Let's talk about a black family that has been discriminated against in a very bad way. So, a black Louisiana family is outraged after their father was denied a burial plot because of the fact that they were black. So now this is Madison and Shayla Simeon, and they were at Oakland Spring Cemetery in Louisiana in order to get a plot for their father, who had recently passed away. So now the woman at the cemetery told them that due to contractual issues, they were not able to sell them a plot. Those contractual issues being, of course, that it is a whites-only cemetery. Yes. Let me give you the quote. Quote, "Unfortunately, I'm unable to sell you a plot. This graveyard is not for people of color. It is a white human being cemetery only." Oh, okay, so all of you who think that racism is over, not necessarily, especially if you go back in the South, because again, these words should not be uttered in 2021, and yet they are. It is absolutely unbelievable. Now, according to the Simeons, the woman at the cemetery had a contract in her hands which read the right of burial of the remains of white human beings. She had this paperwork, Shayla said, in her hand that she said that was drawn up about 70 plus years ago. If we really wanted to have him buried there, we would have to get board approval because he was a colored man. And so this was back in the 1950s, and it still existed. That's insane. You have a cemetery that is literally whites only in this century. In this century. I live in Portland. It's not just the South. True. No, okay, so I'm wrong. Like, racism does absolutely exist everywhere in this country. It is an unfortunate fact that we see it in a lot of different places. Even in the North, I live in Michigan. There's of course racists here. I've met some of them before, so I understand. But to see that it's still institutionalized in this country in certain places is insane. Absolutely insane. Dig them up to prove that they're all white. All right, so now turns out that the Oakland Spring Cemetery Board is aware of the incident now, and they are very, very sorry about this. In fact, Craig Vizina said, quote, "I'm still very ashamed of what happened. Who wouldn't be?" Well, yeah, I mean, everybody should be ashamed. The entire state of Louisiana should be ashamed. Stuff like this still apparently happens. Vizina says the contract was written in the 1950s when the cemetery was first opened, and that changes will be made. I promise you, it will be fixed. So now, I hope so. I'm glad that they took corrective action, but the question is it really enough? I mean, on the one hand, you could say, well, they did what they corrected the action, so they did all that they could really do. But why didn't they just say, well, screw this contract, I don't really care, it doesn't apply, we shouldn't have to go through the board for this. This is a literal no-brainer situation here. Of course you can bury your dad here. As long as you got the money, you can bury your dad. And of course that goes to another question of like, why do we have to, pay money to bury people? But that's an entirely different thing. That said, the Siemens think, no, the damage is done. We don't actually want to bury our dad here. He deserved better. In fact, quote, Shayla said, my dad wasn't any man. He was a phenomenal man. He was a police officer in the same community for 15 years. He was denied a place to lay because of the color of his skin. And that is a pretty devastating point. And even somebody who's in the system, police officer, a black police officer, can still be discriminated against in this country. And that's, again, anybody who says that racism is over in this country, no, the legacy still exists. Yes, the Klan might not be, well, okay, I take that back. Charlottesville is a good example of the Klan being out and open, and people, of course, being against the entire idea of Black Lives Matter. And so this isn't a surprise to see that this continues to happen all around this country. And so they were, by the way, offered a family plot. They declined, and then the employee has been denied, or the employee who had denied them a burial has been fired as a result of this. So I don't know. It's up to you to kind of figure out whether or not you think that this was enough restitution. But it should point to a broader conversation on trying to dismantle the institutions, the implements of Jim Crow, and even further back, slavery, because even though there's been quite a large passage of time between now and the end of slavery, and not so much time between now and the end of Jim Crow, there are still these, and people think that it's a long time, but these institutions still exist. These things still exist. These laws are still codified, and we need to do something about it to really untangle that disgusting, disastrous legacy of racism in this country. So the Klan is alive and well. I watched KKK rallies in Lexington on MLK Day until 2000 at least. Jeez, true. The right will scream cancel culture. Well, hey, if you're afraid of being canceled for being a white supremacist and a Klan member, well, I mean, that's one problem. Okay, that's one problem. Many more you have, though. All right, anyway. That's all I'm going to go for today. I want to thank some, let's see. Oh, I want to read some super chats from y'all. Yay, this is a great collab to start the year. I can't see your name, though. Hold on. Okay. I really want to see that. But thank you, a person that I cannot see the name, for the super chat. Much, much appreciated for that comment. Rielen N says, for the Financial Times Fund, nice shirt. Thank you. Oh, wow. That's incredibly generous. Thank you so much for that. Asthmatic Turtle says, powerful Jeff and Anna, good news today. Virginia, where I live, may legalize marijuana this summer. Oh, that's excellent. Get high, everybody. Ty Jones says, the new hot stock up, invest in tissues for billionaires to cry into. I love that. Oh, I love that. Best comment, Nazik Hoot, thank you so much for the very kind $10. Virginia Thomas, Ice Dragon, says, when they say you can't take it with you, but obviously racism doesn't count. Truth. And then Izzy Sanchez, awesome show. Jeff, love your show. Thank you so much, Izzy. Much, much appreciated. So thank you so much for those very, very kind donations. Wonderful of you to do that. Thank you, Ravaging Wolverine, for signing up for a 4 months on Prime. Thank you so much. All the follows as well. Much, much appreciated. All of you, thank you so much. Have an excellent, excellent weekend. We'll be seeing you on Monday. So enjoy yourselves, stay safe, and remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. Love you guys. Have a good weekend.
Tolerate. Tighten up my knee. I like my knee tight.
Wet ass P-word.
Please flag.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
Don't you want to please me?
Please clap.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out.